When we're done, it's going to look something like this. Let's do it. All right, so we got our inspiration right here. If you want this photo, GitHub repo's in the description. So first thing we're going to do is get this header going. So right here, we got a blank page. We're going to come in here. We're going to say class name. We're going to say BG Slate 800. We're going to say flex, call, min, height, screen. And then we're going to say text, white. So now we're going to come in here and we're going to create a header. And inside of this header, we're going to create a nav. Also inside of this header, we're going to have a button to the left of the nav and a button to the right of the nav. So this button right here is going to say travel look. And then this button right here is going to say book now. Also with this header, we're going to give it a class name. We're going to say flex, and we're going to say justify center. We're going to say item center. And so we can see what's going on better. We're going to say BG red 400, and we'll give it a height of 20. I'm actually going to give it a height of 24. And instead of this justify center, we should actually do justify between. And inside of this nav now, we'll have several buttons. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buttons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the first one is going to say home. And actually, instead of making these buttons, I'm going to make these all Next.js links. So import that from Next.js. And so what we're going to do for all of these is we're going to add an href, and we can just make it home for now. So now when we click on one of these, it's going to take us to the home page. So we can actually make these all set to landing dash page. When you actually do this on your website, you're going to want to set this to the home page, the whatever page. So we got home, about, destination, tour, and blog. And so for this nav, we can give it a class name of flex, and we can say gap of 4. We'll actually do 6. Actually, let's do 10. And then also come up here to this header and we'll say a PX of 8. So this part that says travel look, we're going to add a class name to this. We're going to say text XL, and we're going to say font semi-bold. And this is a slightly different font, but we're just going to go with this for now. We can now go to this book now, and we can add a class name to this, and we'll say BG orange 700. We'll say PX of 3. And a height of 10. Actually, instead of this height of 10, we can just say a PY of 2. And then we can say rounded large. Actually, I'm going to set this to rounded XL. And so we can make this a little bit wider and a little bit taller and make the color a little bit different. So we'll say BG orange 600. Actually, I like 700. We'll say a PX of 6 and a PY of 3. We'll actually go PX of 8. And so now we can come up to this BG red and get rid of this. Also on this nav, we come over here and we say font, and we'll say thin. We'll actually say light. We'll also come to this book now and we'll say hover, and we'll say brightness 110. So now when we hover over this button, we can see it's going to get a little bit brighter. We can also add a transition. I think this will be colors, and we'll say duration 200, and we'll say ease in out. Let's see if this works. Okay, so instead of transition colors, we're going to say transition all. So now we'll get this fading effect. So now we're going to make this so when the screen gets smaller, all of this right here is going to condense into a menu icon. So we're going to come to this link and we're going to say hidden, and then we're going to say once it gets to size medium, we're just going to say block, and then we're going to do the same for this right here. So we're going to say hidden and then medium block. Actually, medium will turn into flex, and then we come over here and we remove this flex. So now these things are not going to be there. And then also we can say ML auto on this link right here. And then once it gets to medium, we'll just say ML of 0. So now when this thing is small, it looks like this. Once it hits medium, all of this pops up. So when it's small, what we want is a menu icon, and we get this from Lucid React. So all you got to do is npm I Lucid React. Once you get that, we then can add a class name to this, and we can say MD hidden, and we'll say size of 10. And now that we have that, I think we can also get rid of this margin left. And so now we have this menu icon, and when it hits medium, it goes away. So now we got the header ready. let's get this image right here. So we're going to add a div, and inside of this div, we're going to add an image tag. And if you want this image, GitHub repos in the description. So we got this image tag. We're going to say source equals, we're going to say slash landing dash page dash image one dot JPG. And so now we've got this image right here. And inside of this div, we're going to give it a class name. We're going to say PX of 4. We're actually going to do PX of 6. And on this image, we're going to give it a class name. We're going to say rounded XL. Also on this image, we're going to say size full, and we're going to say max height. We're going to say brackets 300 pixels. We're actually going to change this to 400 pixels. And so now this thing gets all distorted, which we don't want. So we're going to say right here, object cover. And so now it's not going to be distorted. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, instead of this max height 400 pixels, I'm going to say max height, let's say 50%. Instead of 50%, max height 50 VH. Actually, we can say, let's try 60. I'm actually going to do 62. So now we need to add this text on top of this image. So what we can do is wrap this image in a div, and we'll say class name. And we're going to take this max height, put it in here, get rid of it right here, and take this rounded XL, remove it from here, put it right here. Actually, I want this also on the image. And so we can make this div relative. And then inside of here, we can create an H1 that's going to say we're taking action. Let's see. It's going to say we're taking action to make the earth a better place. And then we can make this absolute. And then we can say text 4XL. We'll actually go 5XL. And we'll say text center. And then we'll say top of 10. And this white does not go well with this photo. So I'm going to say text slate 400. Let's actually try 700. And then we'll say font semi-bold. And so inside of this same div, now we can make another div that is also going to be absolute. And we're going to say bottom of 10. We're actually going to say minus bottom of 10. And just to see what's going on, we'll say BG red 500. We'll say width 96, and we'll say a height of 20. And then we can say left 1/2. And we can say minus translate X 1/2. And so now this thing's going to be centered. And now we can fill it with this right here. So we're going to have 3 inputs and a button. And we can also, instead of making this a div, we can make this a form. So this button is going to say explore now. So let's see what this looks like. We also want to make sure that this form is flex, and we can get rid of this width, and we can get rid of this height as well. Instead of this minus bottom 10, let's go minus bottom of 8. Let's actually go 6. And we'll also add a padding of 4 to this. And we'll say rounded XL. And now we can remove this BG red 500. And we can say BG white. And for this button, we can say class name BG orange 700. And we can say a width of 36, a PY of 3. And we can say rounded XL. Also, for each of these inputs, we're going to wrap this in a div. And above the input is going to be an H3 tag. And this one's going to say location. So now we can copy this and paste 2 down. So we got location, date, and guest. And now we can remove these 2. And then for each of these divs, we can say a class name. We'll say text black. And we can also add this chevron down. So we'll say from Lucid React, chevron down. And we'll say class name, we'll say text black, and we'll say a size of 5. And then we also need to go to these divs. We actually don't need to add this text black to this chevron down, so we can get rid of that. And to each of these divs, we need to add a flex items center. Fuck. And so we can see these inputs. I'm going to add a class name, and I'm going to say BG red 400. And so we actually need to get rid of these this flex and item center, and we need to put the chevron down inside of the H3, and then make the H3 flex item center. So we'll do this to all of these. And then on both of these H3s, say class name flex item center. And so this form, I'm going to say flex call. And for this button, I'm going to say width full. And then once it gets to medium, the width of this button is going to go to 36. And this form is going to go to flex row. And on all these H3s, I'm going to say text large. Actually, let's see what XL looks like. Yeah, we'll go text XL. And so now when it's small, it looks like this. So we're going to say when this hits medium, it's going to be minus bottom 6. Otherwise, it's going to be minus bottom, we'll say 36. See what that looks like. We need to actually make this 40, let's say 48. And then also this H1 right here, we're going to say text 3XL. And then once it hits small, we'll have a text of 5XL. And now we can get rid of these BG red 400s and we can say border B. And then we can also, in this form, we can say a gap of 2. And then also on all these H3s, I'm going to say text center. Also on all these chevron downs, I'm going to say a margin left of 2. And on these inputs, we can also add some placeholders. So for the first one, we'll say, where are you going, with no question mark. For the next one is when you will go. And then for the last one is number of guests. But we're going to use proper English, so we're going to add an S to that. We're also going to add an S to this one right here. So now we need to add this bottom part right here. So in this div that says a PX of 6, underneath the div we were just working with, we're going to create another div. And this is going to have an H4 called popular searches. And then beneath that, we're going to have a div. And in this div, we're going to have 5 buttons. We'll say London, New York, Paris, San Diego, and we'll say Las Vegas for the last one. And so for this div, we'll add a margin top of 20. And then beneath this H4, we need an HR, which is going to be this, but we want a class name. And we want a width of 20. And we can also put this, and so this div, we can say flex call, and we can say item center. And then for this HR, we can say a MY of 10. Actually, I'm going to say an MB of 8 and an MT of 2. I'm actually going to make it an MB of 5, and I'm going to make it a width of 16. We can also come to this H4 and we can say text 2XL. And then for these buttons, we can say a class name, we can say flex, we can say gap of 4. And then for each of these buttons, we can say class name BG orange 700. And then for each of these buttons, we can say border white. Actually, I think it's already going to do that. So we just say border. And then we say rounded XL. And then we say a PX of 3. Actually, we'll go 6 and a PY of 3. And for this one that says New York, we're going to say BG orange 700. And so now we just need to make sure that this works on all size screens. So when this thing gets small, we need to make this do something different. So when this gets to medium, we have a margin top of 20. Otherwise, we're going to have a margin top of 48. See what that looks like. Okay, we'll say a margin top of 56. And then also, this is going to be flex call. And then when it hits medium, it's going to be flex row. So now when it's small on a phone, it's going to look like this. We can also come up to this div right here, and we can say a PB of 20. We'll say a PB of 8. So now there's going to be a padding at the bottom. So it's going to look like this when it's small. And then as it gets larger, it's going to turn into this. I also am not liking how this text is looking right here. So what I'm going to do is in this H1, I'm going to say BG white. I'm going to say BG white /20. We'll actually go /50. We'll say backdrop blur. And then we're going to say MX of 3. Actually, we're going to say an MX of 4. And then we're going to say a PY of 2. And then we're going to say rounded of, we're just going to say rounded. Actually, we'll say rounded large, which for some reason is not working. So we're going to say rounded XL. We can also say in this H1, we can say a PX of 2. When this thing gets large. And so for this H1, what we also need to do is we need to say left 1/2 minus translate X 1/2. And we can say, actually, instead of width of full, we're going to say, yeah, we'll say width of full and we'll say max width. We'll say max width 96 and then get rid of this MX4. And so now as this thing gets larger, so when this thing hits small, we want to say SM max width, and we'll say 450 pixels. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say max width equals, I'm going to say 60 VW. We have to wrap this in brackets. And so now this thing is going to dynamically change. So there it is. If you learned something, subscribe. You want to learn some more? Watch this video right here. See you next time.